I never saw it coming. Candy and I had been married for 5 years, and up until recently I thought we had a solid foundation. Sure, every marriage has its ups and downs, but we always seemed to be on the same page, until we weren't. Looking back, maybe the signs were there. Subtle shifts in her behavior that I brushed off as stress or routine changes. She had been more distant lately, distracted even. She was snappier than usual, impatient with me over small things. At first I chalked it up to work stress, but then there were other signs. Her sudden disinterest in our usual weekend plans, the late nights at work events, the unexplained absences. Then there was the laundry incident. One evening after a weekend camping trip with my boss Jake, I was tossing our clothes into the hamper when something caught my eye. A pair of Candy's panties had a hardened stain in the gusset. My heart stopped. The scent was unmistakable, and the realization hit me like a freight train. I stood there staring at the evidence in my hands, unable to breathe. My wife had been with someone else. That moment shattered something inside me. I needed to know the truth. I wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but I also wasn't naive enough to ignore the evidence. I went to see a lawyer, Ruby Hawkins, a tough-as-nails divorce attorney who had helped a buddy of mine through a similar situation. She was blunt. "You need proof," she said. "Solid, undeniable proof." That's when the plan began. I installed a tracking app on Candy's phone. It was a violation of trust. I knew that, but I had to be sure. Ruby also gave me a small audio recorder, which I hid in her purse. I hated doing it, but the doubt was eating me alive. The first major clue came when I was out of town on business. I called Candy, like I always did, just to check in. She told me she'd been asked to waitress at a party at Jake's house, something about one of the waitresses calling in sick. That set off alarms in my head. Jake had never mentioned a party before, and why would he ask her? The next day, when I tried calling her, she didn't answer. My gut told me something was very, very wrong. A few hours later, I got an email from the private investigator I had hired. It was short, but it made my blood run cold. Candy spent the night at Jake Hudson's house. She's still there. She was very busy last night. Attached were photos I wish I had never seen. Candy wasn't just with Jake, she was with 3 men. My hands shook as I scrolled through them, my stomach twisting into knots. These weren't strangers. These were people I knew, people I had trusted. My wife, the woman I had built a life was with them, completely unbothered, completely lost in it. I was devastated. But the worst part? It didn't stop there. The next day I got more photos, 10 men, including Jake's son, Mike, including several employees from Jake's company, including strangers. My mind shut down. I couldn't process it. I was thousands of miles away, but I had never felt more trapped. I had to finish my business trip, act normal, pretend like my world hadn't just crumbled beneath me. But inside, I was barely holding on. When I finally flew back home, Candy had no idea that I knew. She picked up the phone when I called, her voice light, casual. She lied to me. She told me she was home getting ready for work. But her phone was still at Jake's house. I clenched my jaw, my knuckles turning white as I gripped my phone. "I'll see you soon," I told her. She had no idea what was coming next. Candy and I met in college. I was never the type of guy who stood out. I wasn't the loud, cocky jock or the life of the party. I was just me. A quiet, hard-working guy who studied computer science while working 2 jobs to cover tuition. My life was about responsibility, not partying. Candy, on the other hand, was something else entirely. She was the kind of woman who could light up a room just by walking into it. Everyone wanted to be around her. She wasn't just beautiful, she had this energy, this way of making you feel like the most important person in the world when she looked at you. She was majoring in business and was part of a sorority, always surrounded by people, always at some event or another. I never should have had a chance with her. But somehow, one night at a coffee shop when I was cramming for an exam, she sat down across from me and just started talking. At first I thought she had mistaken me for someone else, but no. She was just that type of person, effortlessly social, effortlessly charming. She asked about my studies, teased me about my serious expression, and before I knew it, we were seeing each other every day. It wasn't long before I fell for her. Hard. Looking back, maybe that was the problem. I loved her too much. I put her first in everything. After we graduated, I landed a job in IT and started climbing the ladder. Candy, on the other hand, bounced between jobs, never really settling on anything. But that was okay. I wanted to provide. I wanted to be the rock, the steady foundation she could count on. We got married after 3 years of dating, and when she told me she wanted kids, I was overjoyed. Family was everything to me. I grew up in a stable home, two parents who had been together for 30 years, who showed me what love was supposed to look like. I wanted that for us. We had two kids, a boy and a girl. Our son, Logan, was 8. He was smart, too smart for his own good. Always asking questions, always wanting to understand why things worked the way they did. Our daughter, Emily, was 6. Sweet, gentle, always clinging to her mother's side. I worked hard for them. I worked late nights, took on extra projects, did whatever I could to make sure Candy and the kids had a good life. I bought her the house she wanted, the SUV she loved. I didn't blink when she spent money on herself, spa days, shopping trips, nights out with friends, because that's what a good husband does. That's what a man is supposed to do. And in return, she threw it all away for Jake Hudson. The breaking point. I came home that evening, my mind racing with everything I had seen, everything I now knew. Candy was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping a glass of wine like nothing had happened. The kids were in the living room watching cartoons. She smiled when she saw me. "Hey, baby," she said. "How was the trip?" I clenched my fists. How was the trip? I had spent the last 48 hours staring at pictures of my wife being passed around by a group of men like a cheap party favor, and she was sitting here, acting like she was the perfect wife and mother. I wanted to grab her, shake her, scream at her. But I wouldn't, not in front of the kids. "Good," I forced out, my voice tight. "Tiring." She nodded. "I bet. You should take a shower, relax a little." I stared at her, and suddenly something snapped inside me. "I know," I said. Her glass stopped halfway to her lips. "What?" I took a step forward, lowering my voice. "I know, Candy. I know everything." I saw it, the flicker of panic in her eyes before she smothered it with a fake laugh. "Babe, what are you talking about?" she said, rolling her eyes. "You sound crazy." Crazy. She was gaslighting me, right to my face. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I scrolled through the photos the investigator had sent me and tossed the phone onto the table. "Take a look," I said. Candy's face went white. She stared at the screen, her hands trembling. Then, as if she had rehearsed it, she put on a mask of indifference and slid the phone back to me. "So," she said, her voice oddly calm, "it's not like I plan to get caught, but now that it's out in the open, I guess we should talk." I saw red. She guessed we should talk. I grabbed the phone and swiped to the next picture. "This is from last night," I hissed. "So while I was busting my A working to make sure you and the kids have a good life, you were at Jake's house spreading your legs for—" Her palm cracked against my cheek before I could finish the sentence. I stumbled back, stunned. "Don't you dare talk to me like that," she snapped. "You don't own me, Tim. You never have." I rubbed my cheek, my jaw tightening. "You're right," I said, my voice ice cold. "I don't own you, but I do own this house. And if you think for 1 second that you're going to keep living here after what you've done, you're out of your fucking mind." She crossed her arms. "I deserve this house just as much as you do." I laughed bitterly. "Deserve?" "You deserve." I pointed at the pictures. "You don't deserve anything from me, Candy, not anymore." She smirked, like she had the upper hand. "That's not how the law works, babe. If we divorce, I get half." Half. Half of everything I had worked for. Half of the house, half of my savings, half of my retirement. I wanted to break something. Instead, I took a deep breath. forcing myself to stay calm. You want half? I asked. Fine, but first, tell Logan and Emily why Mommy's moving out. Her face twisted in anger. You wouldn't. Watch me. We both stood there, staring each other down, neither of us willing to break first. Then the front door opened. I turned, expecting to see one of the kids. But no, it was Jake Hudson. He stepped inside like he owned the place, smirking like this was some kind of game. And that was it. That was the moment I lost control. Jake Hudson stepped into my house, into the home I had built for my family, with my money, with a smug smirk like he belonged there. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Candy, he said casually like I wasn't even there. You ready to go? My hands clenched into fists. I wasn't a violent man. I had never been the kind of guy who threw punches or picked fights. But in that moment, I wanted to destroy him. I wanted to rip the smirk off his face, pound him into the floor until he understood, until he felt what he had taken from me. Candy stepped past me without a second thought, without hesitation. She picked up her purse, grabbed her coat, and smiled at him. Not at me, not at the man who had given her everything, who had worked his ass off to make sure she never had to worry about a damn thing. She smiled at the guy who had taken a wrecking ball to our marriage and was now standing in my doorway like he was picking her up for a date. I didn't realize I was moving until I was right in front of him. If you step one foot into this house, I said, my voice low, shaking with rage, I'll end you where you stand. Jake's smirk faltered for a second, just a second. Then he scoffed. Relax, man. She made her choice. Candy looked at me then, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Like I was just some obstacle she had to get through. I expected her to yell, to call me an asshole, to justify what she'd done. Instead, she just sighed. Tim, I know this sucks for you, she said, but you had to see this coming. I laughed, a bitter, humorless laugh. Had to see this coming? You mean you sneaking around, fucking my boss and half his company behind my back? Yeah, babe, I must have missed that part in our wedding vows. She rolled her eyes. Rolled her eyes. Like I was overreacting. This was going to happen eventually, she said. We haven't been happy for a long time, and you... She jabbed a finger at me. You made it easy. Easy. I stared at her, my whole body vibrating with rage. Explain that, I said through gritted teeth. She shrugged, shifting her purse higher on her shoulder. You were comfortable, Tim. You worked, you came home, you sat on the couch. You didn't excite me anymore. Excite her. I had broken my back working overtime so we could afford this house. I had made sure the bills were always paid, that the kids had everything they needed. I had done everything right, and it wasn't enough. You wanted excitement? I whispered. She nodded. I stepped aside and gestured toward the door. Go. She blinked. Go, I repeated. Get the fucks out of my house. For a second I thought she would fight me on it, that she would remind me about divorce laws, about how half of everything was hers. But she just grabbed Jake's hand and left. The nuclear option. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the divorce lawyer's number on my phone. I knew what was coming. Candy was going to drag this out, bleed me dry. She was going to fight for half of everything, no matter what she had done, no matter how much she had betrayed me. And then there were the kids, Logan and Emily. They didn't know yet. They were asleep, blissfully unaware that their mother had just walked out of their lives. I refused to let her win, so I made a plan. First, I called my lawyer. I want a divorce, I said, but I also want full custody. She sighed. That's going to be tough. She abandoned her kids, I said. She walked out of here and didn't even say goodbye to them. That got her attention. That might work in our favor, she admitted. But we need proof. We need something solid. I had something better than solid. I had evidence, the photos, the tracker data, the recordings, every disgusting, humiliating thing she had done. I sent it all to my lawyer, and then I sent it to Jake's wife. hell breaks loose. Jake's wife, Lisa, was a quiet woman. I had met her at company parties, exchanged polite conversation. She was always soft-spoken, reserved. But when she saw the evidence I sent her, the fury that came through the phone was volcanic. "That son of a b," she hissed. "I thought you deserved to know," I said simply. "Oh, I know," she snapped. "And he's about to find out exactly how much he just fopped up." She wasn't kidding. By the next morning, Lisa had thrown Jake out of their house and frozen all their joint accounts. She was the real breadwinner in their marriage. He had been the one benefiting from her money. Now he had nothing. Jake showed up to work looking like hell, bags under his eyes, his expensive suit rumpled. And then he got fired. Turns out the CEO of our company had also received an anonymous email with photos of Jake hosting company-sponsored sex parties. Guess who wasn't amused? Jake was escorted out of the building by security before lunch. Candy, on the other hand, had no idea. She was still wrapped up in her fantasy, still clinging to the idea that she and Jake were running off into the sunset together, until she tried using her credit cards and found out that I had already frozen our joint accounts. She called me, screaming, "You can't just cut me off." "You left," I said coldly. "You made your choice. Now live with it." "You're going to regret this," she spat. I laughed. "Oh, I don't think so, but you? You'll regret it for the rest of your life." She didn't believe me, not yet, but she would, because I wasn't done, not even close. Candy had always lived in a world where consequences didn't apply to her. She was the pretty girl who could talk her way out of a speeding ticket, the fun wife who could twist an argument until I was apologizing for her mistakes, the center of attention, the one who always had a backup plan. But not this time. This time she was on her own. I knew it the moment she showed up at the house 3 days later, pounding on the door like she still had a right to be there. I didn't answer right away. I stood at the window and watched her. She looked different. Her makeup wasn't perfect. Her hair wasn't curled. She wasn't dressed like someone about to have a luxurious day out. Instead, she looked nervous. She wasn't used to not being in control. I let her pound on the door a little longer before I finally opened it, keeping my face cold, unreadable. She crossed her arms. "I want to talk." "No." Her nostrils flared. "This is my house too, Tim." "No, it isn't," I said. "You left. You walked out and didn't even look back. You don't live here anymore." Her jaw clenched. "You can't just shut me out." I leaned against the doorframe. "Oh, but I can," she scoffed. "Are you seriously going to be this petty? Look, I get it, you're mad, you're hurt, but you can't just erase me from your life." I smiled, but it wasn't a kind one. "Watch me." Candy shifted her weight, chewing on her lip. For the first time, there was uncertainty in her eyes. I let her stew in it. Finally, she sighed. "Look, I made a mistake, okay?" I raised an eyebrow. "Which part? The cheating? The lying? The fact that you weren't even remotely careful about it?" She swallowed hard. "All of it." For a brief second I saw it, the regret, the panic. But it wasn't because she missed me. It was because her fantasy was crumbling. She thought she was trading up, running off with a rich, powerful man. But Jake had nothing now. His wife had kicked him out, taken his money, and ruined him. He was unemployed, homeless, and spiraling. And Candy, she had bet everything on him and lost. I crossed my arms. "Why are you really here, Candy?" She hesitated for a second too long. I just want to figure things out. Maybe we can work something out." I let out a humorless laugh. "No." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Tim, you humiliated me," I said, my voice low. "You destroyed our marriage. You abandoned our kids. And now that your little fantasy didn't work out, you want to figure things out?" I took a step closer, my voice turning into a whisper. "You're pathetic." She recoiled like I had slapped her. Good. She needed to feel that. She needed to understand that there was no coming back from this. "You need to leave," I said simply. Her face twisted into something ugly. You think you're punishing me? Fine. But don't forget, Tim, I still get half in the divorce. I smiled. Do you? She faltered. What? I leaned in just enough to see the panic flicker in her eyes. I have photos, Candy, video, records of everything you did, evidence of you abandoning your kids. I sent it to my lawyer days ago. Do you really want to test me on this? For the first time since this nightmare began, Candy looked scared. Good, because I wasn't done yet. The final blow. The next week was chaos. Candy tried to fight. She tried to lawyer up, tried to claim she still had a right to the house, to my money. But every time she pushed, my lawyer pushed back harder. Every document, every surveillance photo, every bank statement, she had nothing. Then came the final blow. One evening, while I was putting the kids to bed, Logan suddenly asked, "Is Mommy ever coming back?" I swallowed hard. I didn't want to lie to him, but I also didn't want to destroy whatever love he still had for her. "I don't know, buddy," I said softly. He nodded, but then he frowned. "Did she leave because she didn't love us anymore?" Something inside me snapped. The next morning, I filed for full custody. I sent every piece of evidence to the judge, the photos, the tracking data, the recordings of Candy telling me in her own words that she was bored of our life, and the court ruled in my favor. Candy lost everything. She got no money from me, no spousal support, no share of the house, and worst of all, she lost custody of our kids. I watched her in the courtroom when the ruling was announced. She looked shattered. She had thought she could slither back into our lives when it suited her. She thought she could manipulate her way out of this like she always had. But there were some things you couldn't talk your way out of. As we walked out of the courtroom, Candy grabbed my arm. "Tim, please, please don't do this. Let me see them." I turned to face her. She was crying now, shaking, desperate. But all I saw was the woman who had ripped my heart out and expected me to thank her for it. I leaned in close. "You made your choice, Candy." Then I pulled my arm free and walked away. Epilogue. It's been 6 months. The divorce is finalized. Candy tried appealing for visitation rights, but the court refused, given the overwhelming evidence against her. She's living in a tiny apartment now, working some dead-end job. Jake is long gone. After his wife ruined him financially, he fled the state. As for me, I'm free. I have my kids, I have my life. And for the first time in a long time, I'm happy. Candy always wanted excitement. Well, she got it. And she lost everything in the process. And me, I won.